Thanks again to Prashantha for the invitation to come and to speak to you guys today. And it's good to see some familiar friends. I saw Kuntal, who I've connected with before on LinkedIn, joining. So it's great to have everybody on. As I said, today my talk is going to be about design systems in Figma. And just, in general, right now, Figma is such an incredible tool, and I'm such a big fan of Figma for a lot of the reasons that Grace mentioned. In my background, so my name's John MacMenamin, if you didn't know or see that. I've worked at some companies you may or may not recognize, and I've had kind of a long time in the field. I've been doing this for 16 years, so ever since I was around 15. I got into design, got into development, and I was kind of a unicorn. I liked building designs, and then since I didn't really know any other developers at the time, I kind of forced myself to learn CSS and HTML. And so I've kind of ping-ponged back and forth through my career as both like a front-end developer, working in technologies like JavaScript and Angular and React, and then also kind of always doing UX design and what we now call like ourselves, which is like product design. From that, more recently, I've been kind of leading teams over the last 8 years and launched some interesting projects and products. The last company that I was at is Voice, and I'm now transitioning to other opportunities. So I'm excited about that and excited to be here today. So a little bit of the agenda. I want to talk about something that I really appreciated that Grace talked about, and that's kind of gaining buy-in from your company, how we see the value that we're trying to bring when we set up a design system. And then what do we need to get started? We're going to talk through kind of the workflow examples. And then I'm going to dive into Figma and kind of do a little bit of practical walkthrough for the different areas that you can set up, which are styles, effects, the colors, and the actual components themselves. Then I'm going to get into kind of showing how we can create more complex components through nesting and different instances. And then I'm going to kind of walk through the publishing and updating as we're making those changes. And then hopefully I'll get to some high-speed prototyping. So first step is gaining buy-in from your company or your clients, right? So why would you want a design system? Obviously, as designers, we have our reasons why we would want to bring that either into an organization if we have a job, or if we're working freelance, why would we want to build that? If we're working freelance, we're kind of like the boss, so we get to make that decision. But what benefit does it add our clients, and how do we talk about that? So with that, I think the approach matters, how we ask for something. I'm just going to take the example of being in a company, since that's been my experience over the last number of years. And so, personally, I've built now 3 design systems within organizations. Built one at WM, at AIG, and then at Block 1 and Voice. And a lot of times, the first approach is pretty predictable, but it doesn't always work. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So it's interesting, hearing the former talk and kind of discussion around, we have our process as either UX designers or if we call ourselves product designers. And that's really clear, right? We're going to go and do competitive research. We might go study the customer a little bit, see the current solutions, and we're going to build our personas and our user journeys, our empathy maps, and all of that, affinity maps, and then we're going to do low fidelity, high fidelity prototypes, and maybe clickable prototypes, and test the whole way through. And that's like really clear, right? It's very easy to understand that process, and it's well laid out. So I like this graphic because I think it relates a little bit to how we have to work in reality. So we've got all these people in the movie Inception, and they're all on this very stable foundation. But the fact is that the environment is changing. It's always changing. And any company that you go into in an internship, it's the same way. You're going to jump in day one, and it's going to be very different from what you expect. And so you're going to have to really mold that formal training, whether you are self-taught and you just spend a lot of time on Medium and Dribble and YouTube, or if you went to a design camp or boot camp, you're going to have to take that and you're going to have to apply it through the lens of whatever that environment is. And in organizations, that means relating that to the business value. So again, it's sort of like a dream within a dream, right? We've got this dream of how we're going to bring value to the users, but then we have to understand we're operating in an environment where we need to relay that and connect that, kind of translate that into value for the business, right? How is this going to help them accomplish their next quarter's goals? How does it relate to the things that they're really passionate about, not just the things that we're passionate about? Because I think within design, we can get into sort of a silo of our own kind of design speak, and that doesn't always completely relate. So kind of in the same way we have to show empathy for users, which we're really used to doing, we need to also step into the shoes of the business and our other peers, right, in product management and engineering, and understand their pain points. And I think a design system is a really cool, unique tool, because for a number of years, the hardest part of design was getting it implemented correctly. And I think now, you know, a Figma design system is the design part of it, but then ultimately, I've also had experience leading teams on the engineering side to implement like a React component system, a library that goes in NPM and it pulls in React components and it mirrors the design system. And that really solves a big problem for engineering when they're trying to ship a product and they're trying to push through a sprint. If they can take a component that's already been designed, that's already been kind of user tested or A/B tested, they found a lot of the bugs, and they can quickly implement that, then it gives them a big advantage for speed, for safety, and for all the other, you know, accessibility, all those other factors. So what does that look like when we go talk to, say, your boss about, hey, we want to build a design system? So from a design perspective, we might talk about, you know, we can maintain design quality, we can maintain consistency. Now we have, you know, 3 or 4 products, and we have designers designing, you know, patterns, multiple patterns in very different ways that accomplish similar things. So we want that consistency. We want that shared language. We provide user delight, right? We might be able to add some animations to these components, make them responsive, and kind of over-deliver on the experience side. We want to update patterns, right, based on the latest research. So it's not a static thing. It's like a living document that changes with trends as they change. And then we want to, you know, build design culture. This is one that we talk about a lot, and it sounds great, and it is great because we know what it is, right? A design culture, this nurturing environment of creativity. But within a business, it's really difficult for you know, a boss or a manager or a VP or a director to understand how that correlates to business value. And so, you know, the way we speak about it can kind of shift. So aligning with the client's needs, right? What do they need? They need quality products. They need to be delivered as quickly as possible because they may have made promises to their boss about a roadmap item is going to get shipped at this date. So they need to make sure they hit the date. Code wants used everywhere. So this talks about the benefit to engineering specifically, and also product management, because they get to say, yeah, we coded this, and it's easier to maintain. It's also lower cost. And we reduced, you know, wasted time, or what's called tech debt. And that's kind of useless code that's in the project. It's not being used, but people don't know it's not being used. So a design system kind of helps make sure that the patterns that are being utilized are coded efficiently and only in one place. There's not multiple pieces of code that are relating to similar functionality. So all these are big advantages. And if we sell it from a business perspective, I've personally seen a lot more traction on taking that approach rather than just talking about all the benefits that we might be more familiar with in the design side. So what do we need to get started? First of all, one of the great things about Figma over Sketch is the fact that it's cross-platform. So if you have a PC, you have a Mac, you even have, say, a Linux box, because it runs in the browser, it's cross-platform, and it has a free tier. And I love this so much. There's many times where I'd be kind of late to a deadline. I'd be working on a project in Sketch, and boom, you know, the license runs out, and you got to go grab a credit card and update it. And the cool thing about Figma is that will never happen. You always have an ability to start with a free sign up. So it really lowers the barrier of entry, and you can figure out if this is something, the design industry that you want to pursue. And they also have kind of these paid accounts, which I've recently upgraded to, and it gives you a little more interesting design system features where you can kind of have a separate design system that gets injected into other projects. And I'll show a little bit about what that looks like. And then the last thing you need to start a design system is to have a product to deconstruct. And so Figma.com, you can go download it now if this is a Figma meetup, so I'm sure everybody's really familiar, but I thought I would just touch on this. And then there's a great native app that I like to use, and it's, again, available cross-platform for all the different devices. And then Figma Mirror is another one that I found not everybody knows about, which is cool. You can download this on your iPhone if you have one, and you can plug that in with the USB cable. And if you sign in through the app on your native device, you can, on your desktop, click on one of the frames, and you can actually see that mobile layout on your phone and interact with it if you have a prototype set up. So it's really nice to get like a real world example if you're building a native app, which I'm going to be working on through this talk today. It's kind of nice to get that perspective. So with that, let me go ahead and jump into Figma. Okay, so we are now in Figma, and I'm going to start in the home page here and talk a little bit about, Figma talk. I'm going to talk a little bit about project architecture within Figma. So I have two files set up here inside a project called UX Layouts, which is one of my brands. And I have the native design system. That is the system of all the different components that will serve this tea time app, which I've done this really crude drawing. I'm sorry, I'm not the best or even close to it, wireframer. But I've got this app concept, and I want to show how we can basically rapidly prototype this at the end once we're done. So with that, I'm going to look over at the comments and make sure that everything's still going well. Is everybody happy so far? Everything's good? Yes? Okay, I see nodding head. All right, good. Trying to make sure I'm not spending 20 minutes and I stop presenting or something. All right, so this is the design system I've set up. One thing I wanted to touch on really quick, and I'm trying to move at the right pace, not go too fast or not go too slow. One of the most common mistakes, other than how you try to sell the design system to an organization, is creating every component that could ever exist in the world. This is a really, really hard temptation to stay away from, because obviously you want to create all the different patterns, and it gets really fun and exciting. And once you start building these components, it can be hard to know where to stop. And one of my first pieces of advice that I would advise is to start small and to start focused on a product that you're going to build or you already have built. If you're at an organization, it kind of makes sense once you have maybe 2 or more products to support, because at that point you can start to make an argument for the compounding benefits of multiple functions with a single code base and a single source of truth aspect. But even if you're just going to build, like, say, freelance native apps, and you're going to design those, I would start from inspiration, whether that's going out on Dribble or Behance and finding something you like, or you have a concept and so you grab your field notes and you sketch it up. Whatever it is, kind of start from first principles and try to, when you first begin, keep that amount of components small. So you'll see I have probably a little too many textiles here. The colors are pretty basic, right? I only have 9 of them. And I didn't really go too crazy with inputs. I have the necessary different states for selection. And then some navigational components, which I'm going to be showing, and some icons, avatars, cards, pretty basic, some photography. So let's go ahead and dive into, you're at the very beginning and you haven't built anything. What are the building blocks of a design system? So there's several different areas. I'm going to start with So in Figma, on this left sidebar here, we have the layers column, and then we have this assets column. So we're going to be starting over on the layer side. And I've got this frame already set up called building. And I'm going to start with just text, just a text box. So I'm going to drag out text box. I'm going to say, this is an example heading. All right, and I'm going to select that. And I'm going to start to maybe style it. So since it's an H1, I'll say maybe it's 32 pixels since we're on mobile. And we'll just go with, I like to always, when I'm doing text headings, see what it's going to look like with the line spacing, so we can kind of get that dialed in. And on these larger headings, I tend to go with something closer to or a little greater than the actual font size. So for this, I'm just going to do 42 pixels and then 32 pixels. For the actual font, I'm using Poppins, which is a nice open source Google font, which I've been currently liking. But I also like, Source Sans Pro or Lato or any of those other ones that are out there. All right, so now let's go ahead and turn this into a text style. So under text here on the right hand side, you're probably familiar with this, you have this little icon with these 4 dots, and that stands for style. So if I click that, I can basically save this as a preset in the design system. So I have the ones that I've already set up. I'm going to create a new one. So I hit the plus to create style. And I'm going to call this large text. And I'll go ahead and create that. And so we see that now shows up in our panel. And so what has actually happened, if we head over to assets, we'll see that we now have this new area. I'll try to close all these so you can see it. Go here. All right, so building. And then one of the most important things is making sure that the actual style is within the frame. So to create, we've got this text style, which is not the same thing as a component. I think I said we're gonna do colors, we're gonna do styles, and we're gonna do components. So it's been saved as a text style. We can also save it as a component, so it will show up and we can drag it out. What are the differences between a text style and a component? Well, a text style will save, for instance, the size of the font, the line heading, and the kind of weight and text style, right? That font family. If you want to also include things like colors or other effects, you can also save it by saying create component, and it will actually show up. So now it's got the purple kind of 4 diamonds. Now it will actually show up under assets, and we'll see under building, we have now our text style. And that means you can actually drag these out onto another artboard. The other way you can do it, you can't, if it's just a style and not a component, you can't drag it out, but you can still use it. And the way you would do that is you could actually select a text box, you could put in some example text, select it, and then we'll go back, we'll disconnect this right now. Attach style, and then we'll go again to our styles button, and we'll select large text. And it's already formatted as that, but if it wasn't, it would change it. So those are the 2 different ways of working. I'll let you decide kind of how far you want to go. I have turned a lot of these actually into components, but because it creates another color style in the color palette, I'm actually starting to, in my workflow, not do that. So I'm not going to actually save it as a component. So what does this setup really mean? So we have a hierarchy here. We have frames, which, for example, this is color. So we're going to look at colors really quick. And then within that, we have the individual, subcomponents. In this case, they're not saved as components because they're a 3rd style, which are called colors. So you can see that I have this color right here. It's 111111, and I've named it ash. So I'm just going to start from scratch again to kind of build these examples. I don't think it'll be helpful if I just show what's already been done. I want to show you kind of the path to get there and what that workflow looks like. So if I select a box just so that I can see what it looks like, and then I'll select, say, a custom color, and I'll do kind of a teal color here. Perfect. And then I'll go, just like I did under the text styles, I can do with this with a color fill. So I click on the style button again, and you'll see instead of all these text styles, I actually have color styles. So I can click a plus, and I can say teal, and I'll say create style, and then we'll see that got added to our palette under this project, which is at the top, we'll see native design system. So we've made a couple of changes. How do you actually publish this so that you can consume it with other projects? You go to this assets tab here. Again, we have layers and then assets, and we click on assets. We'll see that there's a little notification icon here. And we'll see that now we have building, we have this new component. And over here on this book, this is really important. It's called the team library. And this is where you will both, within the design system, publish out changes. And inside of another project, like we're going to do for tea time, we will actually update and it will pull in changes. So we're pushing out from our design system, we're pulling in from our example project. So we'll go to the team library. And the first time you do this, right, it's going to be named whatever the name of your project is. So in this case, it's called Native Design Systems. And I can just hit publish 3 changes, or I can go drill in and I can see actually, you know, the differences in the components, basically the change that's happened. So I'll go ahead and publish those 3 changes. So I'll go ahead and do that. And I can write a kind of a comment, but I don't have to. I can just, if I'm Russian, I can fly through it. So what does that mean over here? We have this tea time app, and it's actually consuming this component design system. So under assets on this side, we'll see native design system, right? And inside of that, we'll see all these different categories. And these categories are all of our frames. And within those frames, all of the published components will actually show up. For example, under building, we have our heading text that we created, right? And I could drag that right out and start using it. So that's as simple as it is. Some things don't always show up on this side here. What are those sorts of things? The effects, the styles, and the colors. Those you'll actually access. For example, if I was to create a box really quick, and I go to fill, again, I'm going to go to this style library icon, and now we'll see we have our teal color over here. So I can pull it in. And the great thing about Figma is I could select, say, 4 or 5 different icons, and I could go to selection, overwrite, and I could change all of them just with one quick preset. And the cool thing is you don't have to stop there. You can do other effects, which are pretty interesting too, including drop shadows. You can do gradients. You can do blur effects. So you can kind of set up all these different effects that you would normally set up in a kind of a one-off manner, right? And you can do that once, and you can kind of go back to those presets, right? So you can have kind of your favorite hits list and do it that way, which is pretty cool. In this case, I'll go ahead and just show what that looks like. And I'm going to set this to a more manageable color. And we'll do a drop shadow. How many of you guys still like drop shadows? I know they're coming back around again, so it's interesting. People feel very passionate about drop shadows. For this one, we'll do like a kind of a bluish shadow. There we go. All right. I'm pretty happy with that. And I'm going to go ahead and take this object in my design system that's inside of building, and I'm going to go over to layers, and everybody knows that if you name your layers, you go to heaven. So I'm going to go ahead and call this shadow. And now that I've named it as an object, I can click this create component, and you'll see it turns into this grouped diamond shape. And that means it's a master component. It's going to show up in the design system, which is great. Now Assets is wanting to kind of have me publish out those changes. Another thing you can do is you can create an instance. So I'm going to grab this object and I'm going to hold Option to duplicate it. And I'll stop right there. And I'm going to go ahead and now we'll see that it doesn't have the same exact icon. And that's because it's an instance of the master component. It's not the master component itself. So in this case, I'm going to select my object, drill down into my box, and I'm going to create a kind of larger drop shadow. So for this one, I'll do like 16 and 16. And so this is sort of like material design, right? We're kind of building depth into the UI. And we'll really go crazy. Show the effect. All right, cool. And now we have kind of an interesting situation. So I want both of them to show up as an instance. So I'm going to actually click to create a master component on this one as well. So now we have two. But we have a problem that they both have the same name. So how do we organize these if we want an instance of shadow that's both kind of regular and large? And this is what's really, really fascinating about the way you can set these up. If I, for instance, let's say I change this name to shadow for the frame, or I'll call it effects. Let's call it that, yeah. Okay, and then we'll take this one and we'll call it shadow, and then we'll put in a slash, and we'll call this large. And so watch what this does. It's going to be very interesting. And then we're going to call this shadow normal, or we could call it actually default might be a better name. This is like the problem in programming too, is like the hardest part is deciding what to name things. You'll find. So I'm going to go ahead and kill this. And we've got effects, we've got our shadow normal and our shadow large, or shadow default. So I'm going to go ahead and do Command S for save. And then I'm going to go over to, and we'll see this little pop-up came up. And it's talking about a deleted component is still published. And so what we can do is we can say remove, and it's going to remove that text style that we don't need anymore. It's going to update that. And then we're going to go over to assets and we're going to add our new shadows, and then we're going to go check them out and see what they look like. So again, I'm going to hit this team library icon. And okay, it's already pushed them out from that last change. So those are updated. I'm going to go into tea time. Am I going too fast for anyone? Is this making sense? Let me go into the comments here. Sweet. Okay. Grace is a fan. Sweet. Nice. What do you guys think about new morphic? Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's an interesting trend. I think with trends, we always have to judge their practical application. I know a lot of people like to hate on Dribble. I don't. I think it's a great place to explore new trends and ideas. I like to stay open-minded. But there is some practicality implications regarding accessibility, where you have light mode and dark mode, and whether it can truly be accessible with all the different like highlighting and low lighting of new morphic. So I think elements of it, just like all the other previous trends, will sustain. Like Web 2.0, we got like bigger fonts, and although that trend died, the bigger fonts kind of like hung around. So I think with everything flat design too, right? I think hopefully the best elements of it will sustain. So, okay, we're gonna drag in, so we've gone over to our tea time app. We're gonna drag in our effects and our shadows. So we go ahead and drag that in. And what we're looking for is an instance. So we have this one component. If we wanted to change it, say when a user clicks on it, from the default to the large, we go to this little pane here called instances. And under instance, we have the default, and then we can change it to large. We'll see what happens is it actually brings in that larger drop shadow. So what's cool is if you have buttons that are small, medium, and large, or you have, say, an H1, H2, H3, you can create an instance. And if you add that kind of architecture where you do the /, then it'll actually organize those together, and it understands that those have some relevance, which is just a really fun, interesting thing. So, and the way you do that, again, the very top level, if you want to create those folders, are the name of the artboards that have published components within them. And then it goes to the component, and if it's a one-off, you can just name it whatever it is. But if it's a group, like say for textiles, I usually do like heading/H1, heading/H2. And so I can create these kind of grouped relationships between components. And this is what I talk about it's so much fun, and you just want to create these all day. And you have to kind of rein yourself in a little bit. Okay, so I showed how to add colors. I showed effects. Let's get to maybe some more interesting concepts around components, for example. Icons, I'm not going to probably go in and recreate all these just because it's very time consuming, but I think you're kind of probably starting to, let me know if this pattern is starting to kind of make sense, and I'll be watching the comments. So what I've done, you can see I've named the frame icons. And then within it, I've brought in some SVG icons, and we'll see those here. For example, the more, right? It's just a group of 2 ellipses. And then I've taken that and I've clicked the Create Component button. So it's become this kind of purple 4-square icon here. And then I've published it. So it's icons-more. And because these are all kind of inside of icons, I don't have to do the /, but potentially in this case, I could have done like arrow/back, arrow/forward if I wanted to group those. And then inside the TeaTime app, if I go under icons, you'll see all the icons that I've published there. And what's really fun is I can go ahead and, for example, if I want to add this more icon to a card, I can just drag it in. When I drag it in, it resizes to whatever its native size is. And then, for example, I could go to selection colors, and I could bring in the teal that we created. Obviously, this is not an accessible color. We would want to test it. But I've recolored that. So now I've got kind of this object, which is becoming a group of components. And initially, it might not be a lot faster, but where it really gets fast is when you start nesting these components together. And that's just what we've done over here under the navigation pane. So you'll see all these familiar icons are utilized within this nav bar that will go at the bottom of our app. And so we've called it navigation, and then we have this item called nav bar, and we have / because like any navigation bar, it has instances of which route is selected, right? Which page are we on this app? And so we have the /home, we have /search, /saved, and /profile. And so what that gives us within this TeaTime app, and I'll go ahead and get rid of this, and we'll start kind of walking through creating this as we move forward. And I know time is running fast, so I'll try to move quickly. So under navigation, that's our frame. We have this item called navbar, and so we'll see different instances of it. So for example, we can drag down home, and I've already kind of sized this to the iPhone 11, which is the 375 width. And you can set up kind of your design system for whatever you want. It can scale, and I'll kind of show a little bit of that in the future. But then under instance, we really see the power of instances because we can change it to the profile page. We can duplicate this frame and then change it to the saved page. And so we're reusing that, and the power of that is that we'll see, for example, when you create nested components, say in the past, I created all of these different frames, and I had, say, 50 different frames of layouts within a real app. And then a PM comes back and says, the stakeholders would like to change the home icon in some way. I would have to go back into all of those different, potentially hundreds of frames, and update that change manually. But within both, a lot of modern applications do this. XD does it. Sketch had their kind of library feature of symbols. But within Figma, it's really, really powerful. So I can go into home, I can go into the object, and I can update it. For instance, I could make it our teal color if we wanted. And what we'll see is that kind of that updated all of the non-changed instances. And so, for example, I could add, if I really want to make this look bad, I can add, say, a black background, and you'll see that kind of that icon, it's a single instance. This will also help keep your Figma files smaller, which is helpful for performance. If your computer fan is always spinning up and it sounds like it's trying to fly away, using a design system can help you really reduce the size of these Figma files, which can help you not like consume all your RAM and crash your computer. So it's really nice practically that way too. All right. Now I'd like to talk quickly about something called auto layout. So in this case, I've created these two components, one called selected and one is like non-selected, basically, unselected, we'll call it. And they have kind of a different text color. This one has a little bubble to show that it's selected, and we've created that component, and that's pretty cool. But the nice thing about this component is that if I go in here and I make changes, you'll see that it dynamically changes the width, which is really interesting, right? So it's kind of flexible and squishy. And the way I did that, I'll go ahead and create one up here just for fun to show. Go into my text styles. I'm going to say nav item or something. And then I'm going to grab that layer and I'm going to do a keyboard shortcut, and it's Shift A. And what that does is it's going to add this frame, or we also call this, you can get to it. Let me see. Yeah, it's called auto layout. So here it is. It's an auto layout frame. And what it's done is we'll see within the actual text item, there's this padding that goes around the item. And so now you could do this, for instance, to make a button. And we'll go ahead and do that. We'll give it a background color just so that you can kind of see. You can kind of, not that. So, yeah. Okay. And yeah, we'll go ahead and make this. Just go ahead and make this a button. So I can update this. I'm using my color styles. Put snow as the color. And then on this frame, I can even radius this, which is kind of fun. So I can go up here. And I could say maybe like 16 or something like that. And I can also tweak these. So within auto layout, what's it doing? It's making it automatically kind of responsive, and it can do it in two different ways, horizontally or vertically. And then you'll see these different kind of padding amounts. So I can bump these up too if I want to. I can, for instance, make this one like maybe 20 to the top and to the right and left, and then maybe like 15 above, or maybe 12 would look better. So there we go. We've got this button, and no matter what we put in it, 1, 2, 3, it's always going to flex. So that's kind of interesting. But what if we wanted to turn this into a nav bar, which automatically spaced out the padding and margins inside and outside these components? So we can do something interesting. We can take this button that we've created. I'll just call it button for now. And we can repeat the process. So I'm going to hold Shift and I'm going to press A again. We're going to see if we expand this, that over in our layers palette, it's created another auto layout object outside of the button. So it's done what it did to the text, making it into a button. It did that to the button, making an actual nav bar. So if I click on the button and then I go Command C, Command V to copy and paste, you see I can create multiple instances. So in this way, I'm kind of creating a vertical nav bar, but say how, it's kind of popular to have horizontal nav bars. So I can take this top parent component and I can switch it from vertical to horizontal, and then boom, it creates this nice array of buttons. And the interesting thing is I can change these and I can make them different, links, and it just follows along automatically. And this doesn't seem that important, but when you get into kind of creating a whole nested card component, or maybe like Instagram stories previews, right, where we've got kind of some of these components like this, for instance, is kind of like Instagram stories. We can have these nesting relationships between all these different flexible components, and it just becomes really, really powerful and fast when you want to mock up a website and you don't want to spend a lot of time manually aligning all the pixels, which is fun but can kind of get tedious. So I can also change the padding between these. I can bump this up to like, maybe like 20 or something like that, and it's going to automatically adjust. So then what I can do is I can take this entire thing within effects and I can turn it into a component. So I've created a component, and I'm going to call this nav item bar because I think I might already have a nav bar. I'm going to go ahead and take that, save that. And then I can, of course, create multiple instances. I could make one with different colors, different padding, different sizes, example. And I'm going to go to assets. I'm going to go ahead and publish that. And publish a change. And then over here, it should be under effects. Yep, we have our nav bar. We can pull that in. And these could be cards. It could be literally anything. And we can go and change these. You can even have sub instances, which is interesting as well. Okay. And we can change pretty much anything we want about this, which is what's so interesting. We can go to selection colors, and really, really easily we could change basically anything about it. So that helps. Tools like that, you can see how you took one component, the button, you nested it inside another one, and you can infinitely nest these components to create some really powerful results. So with that, I know we're running low on time. I'm going to go ahead and try to just mock up this one page really quick using the components that I have in the system that I've built. And I'm also going to share this Figma file. It's on my Dribble, so I'll share the link to that in the presentation, so you can actually get this design system and you can mess around with it yourself. So we already have the nav bar, so we're off to a great start. The item that I was just talking about, I believe it's under navigation. Yes. Okay, so we have this item here with kind of these color selections here, and this was tea time, so we could change these colors to represent different colors of tea. So like black tea, red tea, we can have green tea, white tea, etc. So another thing that I've done, which I really like to do, is set up a grid. So I have a grid on here, and it's just turned off. If you want to add one, I'll show you how to do that really fast. You just hit plus under layout grid, and then it starts with kind of this crosshatch, and you can change it to columns. For mobile, I usually do 4. My gutter, I've done 20 before, it feels a little tight. I've done 30, it feels a little loose. So I usually set it to about 25. Oh, I'm sorry, margin. And then for this, I set it to like the default body font, which is like 16 pixels. So we've got that, and we can turn it down too. If it's like too bright, we can change, oh, that's way too much. We can reduce it. If it's distracting, we can turn it off too. We can kind of toggle it like that. So it's nice because you'll see that we can snap to it, which in this case, we have some weird padding going on. So I'm just going to throw this down here, and I'm going to try to just drag these on, and then we'll make it look good as we go. Is this helpful so far? Ooh, Iconify. Nice. Where would you import the icons for? There's this plugin that I like, which can right-click, go to plugins. It's called Feather Icons. I love Feather Icons. It's a free plugin, so you can go to just the main page and download it. And Feather Icons have some really, really nice ones. At previous companies, I've also purchased something called Nucleo, which is like 30,000 icons. They all match, and they have an app, and you can export and like control the widths and all of that and the colors, which is really nice. But you'll see like I basically used these icons for this because they're free and open source, and I just modified the home one just to my liking. All right, so the next thing we want to do is this little like subtitle or label. So I'm going to go under typography. I'm going to go to, let's see, link, I think it is. Yes, this one. Okay. And go ahead and change this up. And the nice thing is now, because I have my grid on, I can just snap to this grid. And I'll go down here a touch, and I'll go 1, 2, 3. And I'm just holding shift because I like to work in like 10 pixel increments, which I believe that's adjustable too. I know a lot of people are fans of base 8 grid. Let me know in the comments if y'all use base 8 or not. I like it, but I find it a little bit constricting in some areas. So we're going to do these vertical cards that I've created. And I also kind of worked on that auto layout so that these should kind of squish based on how much text is inside of them. And then they're basically made up of these grid cards. Now, why would you use really, really basic shapes? Because if you make all of your components with their radiuses based on these sub cards, if you update the radius, you decide you want to go like tighter or looser on that radius, then it will update and cascade across your whole app. So it'll be really, really easy to update. And that's the reason you would do that. Now I'm just going to take this component. I'm going to hold Option, and I'm going to duplicate it. 15 pixels. I'm going to do like 25 just because it's a bigger item. And then I can go in and I can update this too. So I can say, and within these, the other interesting thing is I was noticing that if I go into layers and I'm inside this vertical card, I can go under, I have something called background images, which you can just literally mask a bunch of regular JPEGs or PNGs. And what's interesting is even after you've componentized it, you can go back and turn on and off these layers. So you can have, for instance, a user avatar, and you can have like 20 or 30 different icons of different people, different personas, and you can just have one component that you can turn on and off all of these different layers to customize. So yeah, it takes a little bit more time than instances. However, the nice thing about it is that you only have to manage one set of images, which keeps your file size low, and it makes it easier to update. Okay, what's next here? We've got the selection tab. So that's a new component. We're going to go under assets and bring that in. And I'm just going to check back. Yeah. Oh, okay. Grace uses base 8. Nice. What's the gutter? Okay, so the gutter is the space between these columns. So these are columns in a grid. The gutter is the space between columns. So for instance, on a desktop site, on a blog, you might have a sidebar that would be on the left side, and then the gutter would be the space between the main page column and the sidebar. And then margins are the space on the outside. And I think, for junior designers, keeping consistent space of the margins is one of the things I see most often abused that makes a really, really big impact, actually. Scale and grid use. So yeah, let's see. Okay, I'm going to bring in navigation, and let me go over to my design system and see what I want. Okay, so I can go into layers, and I can see it's tabs bar. Okay, so it's not under navigation. It's under tabs. Here we go. Tabs. Okay. There it is. That's better. I'm going to drag this in. And it's okay that these kind of go off the screen, because with these you might have shorter labels. And so I'm just kind of designing for bad data, which is always a good practice. And then we have kind of more normal size labels, it's going to look fine too. So I'm going to go ahead and update this. So it's trending teas. accelerate this, and okay. And then we've got a title and a subtitle. So let's go ahead and look to our, and the one thing you have to do is you have to keep kind of closing these so you can kind of see the forest despite the trees. I'm going to go to my headings. I'm going to bring in my big H1 header for this guy. And again, we're going to snap that right to the grid. And then we're also going to look at just the body font, the subtitle. So I'm going to bring in just my normal body style. So let's see. Right. Is this making sense to everybody? Is this seen as valuable? Because the one thing that I love about okay, bye Grace. Best naming convention for design systems. Oof. I don't know. I mean, I would explore as you start kind of feeling this out. A lot of it's recognizability for who's going to be consuming it. So, for instance, maybe if the engineers don't like nav bar, they want tab bar, then maybe that's something you would take into consideration in your naming conventions. Also, it's helpful if it makes sense to you, especially if you're more of a freelancer. So I think it's really up to you, right? What you want to do. So in this example, I've kind of quickly scaffolded this user interface using all of these pre-built components. As I said, I'm going to make these available. In fact, it's already out on Dribble right now, so you can take a look at it. And then as you're building this, right, if you want to really get a feel for what it looks like, you can always turn off this grid just under grid layout, and you can kind of see your design. And then maybe for finishing touches, you could go into photos, you could add like a background and logo, and don't worry, we're going to format these in a sec. And then we'll go to heading, we'll do like an H2. And we'll just quickly throw this together. All right, if you have questions, go ahead and drop them into the comment section, and we'll move into Q&A. And thanks again, you guys are just been totally amazing. I'm going to go over to layers, get out assets so I can control this a little bit. I'm going to select a different photo. Category item modifier is the most standard convention. Thank you, Arco. You answered that question beautifully. All right, I'm going to go ahead and go with that. I'm going to drag up a little bit of a mask because it's a little intense. Put some green over that, and I'm going to update this to be more centered. And we're going to go with snow color. I found it. And this is just an icon I found on Flat Icon. Flat Icon's cool for kind of more interesting illustrations, as well as maybe Lottie. You can go get some free Lottie animation, so we could make this animated if we want. I believe there's a plugin on Figma, and you can bring in Lottie animations, and you can actually see them animate when you go to like prototype. If you built this into a prototype, you could actually see them operate, which is obviously pretty cool. Now, this is one of the features I love most about Figma is this selection colors. I don't have to dig through the layers palette, but I can just go to selection colors, and I can quickly overwrite a standard color, which is just kind of fun. So yeah, not the best looking app in the world, but it was really fast. And what's interesting is as you tweak more and more of your preferences, say I want these icons to be like 6 or 7 pixels bigger or whatever, I can go and update this. And the design system is going to flex and evolve and grow with me and you as a designer. And it's going to kind of match your preferences. You're going to be able to A/B test these potentially in an environment where you can kind of see what users prefer. And so this is a living document. You're not going to create it right the first time. I definitely didn't do that and still haven't. It's kind of a constant journey of evolution to figure out what works best. So with that, I'll go ahead and close out and then I can take some questions. So let me present this. So yeah, we'll take questions. And then at the end, I'll close with some resources. If you want to screenshot this, again, I want to say thank you very much. You've been an awesome audience. My Dribble is Hello Johnny Mac, like most of my social. On LinkedIn, I'm at John MacMenamin. And then on Instagram, I have a couple of different handles. Hello Johnny Mac is like my personal brand. And then on that, you can get to UX layouts and UX mentorship, where I post UX layouts is all like a lot of Dribble inspiration of layouts that I'm kind of enjoying. And a lot of that is mobile centric, native centric. And then UX mentorship is a lot of carousels for kind of like UX and product design training. So thanks so much. Let's go ahead and jump into the comments if we have any questions. And feel free to like come onto video. I'm going to stop presenting so we can kind of focus back. All right, let's see here. Okay, so Apple's neumorphic design. Yeah, it's interesting. I think I provided some thoughts on that. Drop shadows, yep. One thing that's been really big is 3D. So there's this kind of surge towards 3D aesthetic, almost to like a comical extent on Dribble. It seems to be the current trend. I don't know what you guys think about it. It's kind of interesting, but I think it has some usability limitations, obviously, as well. Where do I import icons? Yeah, feather icons or Nucleo if you want like enterprise level icons. Iconify, I haven't heard of that. I'm going to check that out. Thanks so much, Krishnanta. Space 8, cool. What space margins do you use between each components on the screen? So I think that really is based on preference. Like if you use a base 8, you might use increments of 8. So like, 8, 16, 32, 56, 64. You might go all the way up to like 128 or whatever. It really is based on personal preference. I mean, for me, like if I'm doing really tight horizontal lists in a native app, I might do like 15 pixels of padding between each one or margin. On the gutters, I like 25 on a native device. It just feels kind of nice. It lets it breathe, but it also gives you enough informational density. On large desktop layouts, if I'm doing between like block sections, I might do like 60, 80, or even 120 pixels between the different blocks just to allow a lot of like visual clarity. Cool. What's my thoughts on Figma versus XD? Okay, so I started with like Photoshop 4, and then I started using Illustrator and Fireworks when like vector UI design really started to take off. Then after a while, I found Sketch. I really liked Sketch. I still think it's one of the most polished applications. I just think that Figma made better business decisions as far as the features that they wanted to promote, including design systems and collaboration, which are the two biggest pain points, I think, in design, is fragmentation and then people just knowing what's going on. So I've used it where we bring in product managers, we bring in engineers into the design files. We use the commenting feature, which is super incredible, just really dope feature. I love that. So yeah, Sketch was like really, really nice. Where Sketch started to fall apart for a big team, which I was like managing, not a huge team, it was just 8 designers. But we had version control issues, so we used Abstract to, it's basically built on top of GitHub, so you can do like branching and merging of features within one cloud-hosted sketch file. And that worked, but then even that started to break down where we'd have like lost work and issues collaborating. And so the live environment that Figma offers is just really awesome. I tried out InVision Studio and it was really cool, especially with animations, but it was just crashing constantly. So I don't know if it's gotten better. Maybe in the comments, you guys can let me know if anybody uses InVision Studio. But it was also kind of cost prohibitive, and we were always trying to build the stack of how do you design with a design tool? How do you have good collaboration and feedback? How do you get prototypes done and animate them? And how do you demo them? So we were using like Abstract, we're using Abstract for version control, Sketch as a design tool, InVision for like prototyping and sharing, because that wasn't always easy in Sketch. And it just got to be like really overwhelming having all those tools. IT had to set it all up and manage it. And while XD I did kind of bounce into for a while, they kept talking about how they were going to have really good collaboration. And it was like 3 or 4 years that like I was just waiting and waiting and waiting. And now it's been like, I think it's been more than 3 years. And so I dove into it. It didn't feel like fully complete in the way that Figma does, as far as how it handles the workflow of designers in a business, and especially on big teams. So I like Figma, how it has a free tier, it's cross-platform, supports design systems well, has good plugin, community, which Sketch always had, and now Figma I think is growing. So there were a lot of reasons why I think a ton of companies and individuals are switching to Figma. It's just a really, really nice tool. There are some UX gripes that I have with it. Like some of the panels I think are a little low contrast. Some of them are a little bit like clean, but clean to the point where it's difficult to recognize features within, especially the right detail pane. So I think there's areas for improvement. Also, their auto tweening feature on prototypes is pretty interesting, but I think it still needs some work. So yeah. Oh, cool. Arco, thanks so much. Design tokens in Figma, any resources? Yeah, so let's see. How do you prefer to use illustrations in UI designs? How and when? Illustrations, within an actual product design are usually on onboarding and edge case handling. So like, for instance, a user is being introduced to a new application or a new user flow. So we might have a little bit of a tour and a carousel, and there might be some custom illustration on that. A landing page, there'll be a lot of illustration to kind of communicate concepts. And so I like Undraw. It's really nice that you can, especially in Figma, update, like you can color pick and kind of overwrite the default theme or color of an illustration really easily, which is nice. Where else? Yeah, so like error screens, success screens, that's where I do use a lot of illustrations. And Lottie animations too, especially. Yeah, Blush, that's great. Cool. So as far as resources, I know we're at time and people are dropping off. If you go to my Dribble, I'll just go ahead and go there. I have included this design system. You can go download it. So if you go to my profile, and it's pretty straightforward. It's just Dribble/Hello Johnny Mac. You'll see my latest project, which I just uploaded this morning, is this native design system, free download. And you can grab the link here, native design system.figma, 20 megs. So you can go download this and check it out. There are other really good ones, but I'm still I just recently switched over formally to Figma. So I've only been kind of using it for like a month or two. So I'm sure there's some really, really nice ones. They're just not coming to mind. And maybe some of you who are a little bit more experienced can highlight that. So with that, unless there's any other questions, I don't want to go too far over time. I'm going to hand back to Krishantha. And thanks again to Krishantha Thanks again to Grace for an awesome presentation.